Welcome everyone to episode 90 of the Send Nutrition Podcast. You're with your host Bryan and Peter today, and we're back from Equitana, and we're going to be talking about gastric ulcers and oxidative stress. What is the link? How are you, Peter?
Good, thank you, Bryan. I'm ready for a holiday, I think, and my liver needs a year-long detox.
Do you have a voice left?
Not much. So let's hope this podcast goes to plan.
So today, this has come about from a vet friend, and she sent an article to Peter and I to have a look at because it may tie into our products with ulcer management.
Yeah, the article is posted by a PhD Dr. Claire Toons and it's pretty recent from 2021. And what it was a really interesting article, which we thought we'd go into it sort of quite deeply here and try to explain it sort of in layman's terms. But what it was the link with oxidative stress with gastric ulcers. So Bryan, do you want to kick things off?
Yeah, so what was reported was that researchers found horses with equine gastric ulcer syndrome, so horses with ulcers, are under greater oxidative stress, and they concluded that they may benefit from additional antioxidant therapy such as supplementation, but they also found a link with nitric oxide and low levels in the body. And this is what Peter and I will go through and try and give our listeners another insight into the management of ulcers in horses, or if you have an ulcer-prone horse, things to consider further to try and manage them properly in their performance or even just daily life.
Yeah, that's well said, Bryan. And before we get straight into it, I think we sort of sound like a broken record with this. People think that it's just the performance horses that have the gastric ulcers, but it's not. It could be a horse that's a stress head. It could be a horse that's just been taken away from an old home into a new home that's struggling to settle in an environment that might not have a mate next to it because it had previously. So, there's a myriad of reasons of why the gastric ulcers obviously form, and we will go into the oxidative stress aspect of it as well. But the biggest thing that our listeners can do is make sure that your horse has got ad lib access to hay or pasture. That is the number one silver bullet to try to minimize the ulcers, because what it does is if they've got something in front of their face 24/7, they're trickle feeders, so it's naturally going to keep their cortisol level down because they have got obviously roughage or pasture in front of them, which will minimize the stress aspect. But Bryan will go into a bit further in terms of the research and a study obviously that was done with this article.
Yeah, 100% agreed, Peter. And what you just outlined is what are the two causes of ulcers in horses. So yes, they can be due to improper nutrition and also stress or environmental stress that is causing their anxiety or having a negative effect on their mental well-being. And what Peter covered there was when you get that foundation right of hay, that's helping the nutrition and the lowering that stress in their environment because it's always there, and that's what their physiology is designed for. So firstly, you can really influence ulcer incidence if you can get those two things right and then go from there. So as you know, in previous podcasts, scoping is the only way to know that if your horse has ulcers, otherwise you are just guessing. But then now we'll look at the further management practices you can take on board that's come through this research.
Yeah, and most people obviously reach out for the ulcer medication, obviously, which we do also recommend in severe cases when it's a grade 3 or grade 4 ulcer. The problem with that is they're not designed to be fed long term, and I mean longer than sort of a couple of months. And if you don't have your diet right, if you don't have the roughage at lib, I mean, all you're going to be doing is you're going to have to keep feed that medication for months and months and months on end, where they're not recommended to be fed for that long.
Yeah, you're just spinning your wheels, you're wasting money. And getting that foundation right, we've got plenty of information on our website to help get your diet into a more ulcer-friendly state. But in turn, that really helps reduce stress because you're supporting a better hormone profile, and that whole gut-to-brain connection is helping their mental capacity.
Yeah, that's well summarised, Bryan. And Bryan, maybe for some of our new listeners, if they've sort of jumped onto this podcast, sort of first cab off the rank, do you want to explain just briefly how that ulcer medication works?
Yeah, so it's a proton pump inhibitor. So it's turning the acid pumps down in the gastric region of the horse where the ulcers occur. It doesn't heal the ulcers as such. It's actually just pulling the acid levels down to give that wall or that membrane a chance to heal itself. So what we're trying to do at Sen is help support that wall in its healing at the same time if you are using that medication that comes through that Ulcer Protect product that we have. What the research has shown is, and long-term use of omeprazole or that lowering the acid in the gastric can heighten the risk of less calcium absorption. So what you don't want is that long-term medication use and then the lower calcium in the body, because the horse needs to draw that from somewhere, and where will it draw it from is from bones, which is not ideal structurally, and that's why we advocate just the short-term use of the omeprazole, and then over a longer term getting the foundations right and having more natural support mechanisms in the diet.
That's extremely well said, Bryan. I knew I'd throw your curveball on that one. You'll be good with it.
And even furthermore to those mechanisms, what we're trying to discuss here today is other things you can include in the diet to help influence lower risk of ulcers in a performance horse in particular.
Yeah, and just one parting word from my end, in human health with the antacids as well, long-term use is proving to kill off mitochondria as well, and horses need mitochondria to produce energy. So this is why the treatment should not be used on a very long-term basis.
Yeah, 100%, Peter. So what we looked at in this article was the researchers, they investigated biomarkers. So I'll try and lower the science jargon and try and summarize it into a more easily understood way. And what they did was they were trying to find markers in the blood to indicate whether a horse did or did not have ulcers. But in this part of this study, it did not show this with these markers. So they actually concluded that scoping is the best method. But then further into this study, the researchers looked at the link between nitric oxide and ulcers. And what they found was that horses with ulcers had significantly lower levels of nitric oxide. So that kind of was like a light bulb to Peter and I when we were alerted to this. And so the first point is, if you have a performance horse or an ulcer-prone horse, nitric oxide supplementation may have a beneficial effect on a horse prone to ulcers.
Yeah, and also performance too, obviously. With nitric oxide, it's great for respiratory health. And look, the ulcer obviously benefit, which you've just outlined, that's just a bonus that we haven't really stumbled upon. Apart from obviously getting into the article. So there's always a link, like in my opinion. So like my wife at one stage had high iron, and I did a bit of research into it, and I linked a high iron with low zinc. So she went and got a second blood test done to get her zinc markers, and they were really low. So obviously she went through the process, was supplementing zinc, and whether it's a coincidence or maybe a not, but her iron actually came down, and then her zinc actually went back to the normal levels, and after I think 2 or 3 months they were all pretty much even. So the point I'm trying to make is that with the nitric oxide, obviously it's depleted. By supplementing a product like the NO3 Boost, we're going to get that depletion up to a level where it needs to be, which obviously might, it probably won't heal the ulcers, but you're going to give it every opportunity to naturally heal itself at a much faster rate.
Yeah, 100%, Peter. We believe it'll have a positive effect on horses that are prone to ulcers, and particularly in that performance environment, it will be helpful.
So, Bryan, also in that study, they did highlight other common antioxidants which were deficient with horses with gastric ulcers as well. Do you want to just go over a couple that they mentioned?
Yeah, so when we look at oxidative stress, they actually concluded that this oxidative stress is evident in horses with equine gastric ulcer syndrome. So firstly, what is oxidative stress? So it's an imbalance of an oxidant to antioxidant ratio in the body of the horse. So increases in oxidative stress has been shown during endurance or intense exercise and performance in competition horses. So the researchers in this article, they concluded that any horses with ulcers may benefit from additional antioxidant therapy. And these common antioxidants in the diet are vitamin E, selenium, but also vitamin C. And as Peter and I discussed before this podcast, we have this covered, but the vitamin C, we really want to cover this in a high quality product. So that's why we have this separately in a powdered form.
Yeah, and the thinking out there is in the industry, oh, well, horses produce their own vitamin C, so they're going to be okay. Yeah, that's true if the horse is out in a paddock doing nothing, and depending on its age, as Bryan said, the performance horses, their requirements are extremely high. It's, as an example, it's like, redlining your car for an hour. Obviously, like the wear and tear on the engine's going to be pretty intense. You might need to do your oil changes a lot more often than if you're just driving at 60 kilometers an hour every day. So it's all about correcting, the possible depletion, and what Bryan's sort of summarized there is that the vitamin C, we think, is the crucial one. Look, it's needed for many functions of the body, not just the immune system. So this link, obviously being an antioxidant and also being low with horses with gastric ulcers, it's a very cost-effective way to supplement. I think it's a 200 gram pouch that we have at $20. Look, it's going to last you, like at 5 grams a day, it's going to last you for months on end. So it's a very good insurance policy to use if you do have a horse, not that just has the gastric ulcers, but is prone to gastric ulcers, or that has had ulcers previously.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing that vitamin C isn't talked about more, and I think it's because the research around it involves that the horse makes vitamin C itself. So maybe it is thought that they make enough, but in recent years, and what Peter and I have gone through with vitamin C supplementation, that's in a perfectly healthy horse. When a horse is under stress, they're not perfectly healthy and may not be producing enough. And these conditions that these horses experience, immune system conditions, and in particular ulcers or skin and coat issues are arising. And this could be that vitamin C is playing more of a pivotal role in helping lower the risk of such conditions.
Oh, that's extremely well said, Bryan. And it's like, imagine horses in the wild. They don't have ulcers, they don't get sick very often because they're not under those stresses. We've taken a horse, we've domesticated it, we've put it in a box, some don't even get enough roughage, if they're in a performance setting. So naturally, it's like us getting locked up into a jail cell and we're going to be in there 23 hours a day out of 24. I know it's a bit extreme of a comparison, but for human health, I'd be stressing like if it was me in that instance. So with that stress involved, this is where the supplementation of vitamin C and obviously Bryan mentioned the vitamin E, selenium, will help towards getting on top of the condition.
Yeah, and furthermore to vitamin C, it helps regenerate vitamin E. Now that's amazing. So when you feed enough vitamin E in your diet, how it's all balanced around, adding vitamin C is going to be even more beneficial for its overall antioxidant profile. It actually prevents the pro-oxidant activity of vitamin E, so therefore it's a co-oxidant and further contributes to increased total antioxidant status and helps reduce oxidative stress, which is what we're trying to do and what the researchers identified as is evident in many horses with equine gastric ulcer syndrome.
That's well summarised, Bryan. And one further point onto that as well. So we've decided to use a sodium ascorbate, which is a pH neutral at 7.0. So what that means is that it's very gentle on the guts of the horses. The normal ascorbic acid in the supermarkets or even in the pet stores, that's a 3.0 acidity, so it's a lot more acidic, and we've decided to go with a much more user friendly 7.0 pH neutral sodium ascorbate, which is still a vitamin C, is just bound to a sodium ion as well. So
yeah, no, it's a really good quality one. We're trying to have the best quality ingredients in all our supplements, and this is no different.
Yeah, and just as a closing point too, so all these things are great, obviously, to help with the healing of ulcers, but it still comes back to the foundation of your diet. So if you're feeding a diet that's contributing to ulcers, you can give it all these antioxidants, you can give it all these supplements, but you're never going to get on top of it. You're going to get better, and then it's going to get worse, and then it gets better because it's getting to the root cause of the problem. If you can eliminate the stresses, if you can eliminate the bad diet, if you can turn that around, and then obviously have the supplements once you've corrected those root causes, you're going to be on a much better plane and angle to get on top of them, but also keep them from coming back.
Yeah, well said, Peter. What we're trying to do is help limit the need to go down the medication route first. Like, obviously there is points in a horse's life if they require it to get on top of certain conditions from poor management in nutrition or stress in the environment. But once you have those foundations, as Peter said, you're going to be on the right track and you're going to tick those boxes that you can control. And then it's up to the horse on how it will cope in those situations, but you're giving it those foundations to actually help its way of coping in performance.
Yeah, 100%. And I think when a diet is where it needs to be, these antioxidants are going to work a lot faster, and the horse is going to respond to them a lot quicker as well, because the diet is balanced and it's not a handbrake on a horse, which is stopping it from naturally recover.
Yeah, so overall, let's summarize the points in this podcast to help horse owners that have performance horses or that are prone to ulcers. So number one, always have the foundations right with the nutrition, but also with stress management in the environment. Number two, from this article or from the research, helping limit oxidative stress by including antioxidants, but also having a look at the nitric oxide status or including a nitric oxide supplement. And with products such as the NO3 boost and the vitamin C, you're helping support the levels and maybe correcting any deficiencies that may exist within the horse.
And then a third point, Brian, maybe our listeners need to look out for a product like the CF50 or the grain-free in case their horse might be deficient in vitamin E, selenium, a few other micronutrients, which are prominent with horses with ulcers just purely because of the stress, because the body uses them up at a much faster rate than a horse that's not stressed or doesn't have the oxidative stress. So make sure that obviously you do have a vitamin mineral supplement in the diet.
With all these 3 points, it's giving that overall support to a performance horse or an ulcer-prone horse, and you're going to give them the best step in the right direction at helping lower the risk of these conditions.
Yeah, that's well summarised, Brian. I've got nothing further to add. Anything you'd like to leave our listeners with?
No, unless you've got another plane ticket for a holiday, Pete. I think we should be right.
I think we'll have a good long rest. We thank everyone for obviously for coming up and chatting to us and all the support. And remember, there's no silly questions. So we're here to help. We're here to educate. It's not just about selling products. It's about informing the horse owner of what we stand for, what we recommend for horses based on their physiology. And look, different companies have different views, and it's, I think there's space in this industry for all of us.
Yeah, I 100% agree with those words, Peter. And as years go by, the research keeps progressing and trying to improve that whole nutrient profile for your horse's diet to help lower the risk of these certain conditions is only going to be beneficial for the horse at the end of the day. And that's what Peter and I are here for, and it is for the horse. So thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.